Hello, I'm Pat Dennis, and welcome to the Theatre of Thrills podcast here on Creative Elk, where today I'm talking about two movies, because one of them I don't have enough to say about to warrant an episode. That one, the first movie I'm talking about, is Unhuman, a title with a level of creativity that should indicate how bad the movie that follows will be. This movie just sucks. It's boring. It's so boring. The first maybe 5 minutes of the film is relatively entertaining. It has sort of the vibe of a trauma movie, but without the same level of crass smut and over-the-top gore. But it has that sort of cheap, fun vibe that trauma movies have for about 5 minutes. This is during the bus ride on their heading to their school excursion. It's about a group of kids doing an extracurricular excursion, and they're on a bus ride, and that's really when you should end the movie, because after the bus ride, when the bus crashes, the rest of the movie just sucks. It's spent almost entirely in an abandoned warehouse, and nothing really happens. There's zombies. Not many zombies, but there are some zombies. And then about an hour and a bit later, there's a twist. But by that point, you're so bored that you're not even sure whether you saw the twist coming or if it's a good twist or not, because you've checked out. You've entirely checked out by that point. The writing is terrible. You have just dialogue that makes no sense. For instance, at one point, the protagonist girl snaps at a dude, and she's like, "No, we're not doing what you say. We've been listening to you all day, and look where it got us." But they haven't been listening to him all day. At no point, really, have they been doing what he said. So it doesn't really track or follow. It's just a line that she said. And the dialogue in this is, I suppose, the worst thing about the film. Any film can be saved with good dialogue, but this doesn't have it. It's pretty obvious that it was written by guys who never ran it past a girl with some of the lines that girls say. Like, the cheerleader chick breaks her nose when the bus crashes, and another girl offers her a steel-wrapped sanitary pad for her broken, bleeding nose, and the cheerleader's like, "Ew," which, isn't the reaction any female would have when handed a steel-wrapped sanitary pad while their face is bleeding. Because, spoiler alert, this is a hot tip to any male writers trying to write female dialogue. Girls come into contact with sanitary pads a lot, and they're not grossed out by steel-wrapped sanitary pads. So keep that in mind if you're ever writing female dialogue. I'm not going to harp on for minutes longer about this movie, because I don't have much to say about it. It's not so bad it's funny. It's just a boring movie, so steer clear. Watch a trauma movie instead. If you haven't seen a Class of Nukem High, watch that, because it's the vibe that this movie was trying to go for and didn't. So just watch Class of Nukem High. It's absurd and so much more fun. This movie is just like an hour and a half of boredom, and then at one point you're like, oh, the bad guy's got a drug glove like Freddy Krueger had in that one Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I think the fourth one or something. And then you go back to being bored, and then credits roll. So I don't recommend it. There's not really any redeeming qualities about the movie. It's just boring. So let's move straight along to the next one. The Possession. I went into this movie expecting nothing. I had it recommended to me by a friend who described it as being a movie based off of the Dybbuk box, which I have a vague awareness of is a real-life physical item in the ghost hunting paranormal world. They've done specials on it and whatnot, and there's a lot of skepticism about if it's actually an anything, or if it's just been designed by these ghost hunting shows. They found a real antique, and they've sort of perverted what its meaning is. I know there's a lot of hullabaloo about it, but a friend recommended it to me and said it was a pretty good movie, so I thought I would check it out. And after the disappointment of The Unhuman, I just wanted a movie that at least someone had told me was worth watching, because I didn't want to watch two bad movies in a row. And fortunately, I really enjoyed The Possession. As far as my knowledge of the Dybbuk box goes, I don't know how heavily based on a true story this film was. I think maybe they had just heard that a Dybbuk box was a antique box that housed a demon or a ghostie and rolled from there. And I'm glad, because it was a good fun movie. It's basically just a Jewish exorcist. Like it's the Exorcist, except instead of it being a Catholic thing, it's a Jewish thing, which is pretty cool. You don't see many horror movies drawing on Jewish folklore and religious iconography. I mean, I'm sure if I googled it, there'd be like 1,000, but the only one I can think of is the Golem, and that was like 1920s. But you know, it's an untapped area of exploration. There's like 1,000 exorcist movies. You know, there's like the famous The Exorcist, but then there's a billion mostly foreign language exorcist movies where it's just a little girl gets a demon in her, and then they have to get the well-meaning but down and out priest in who does the exorcism, and then that scene goes for 2 hours and then the movie ends. So it's good fun to actually have a different culture than we usually see being tapped for a horror movie. And good God, do they go all out in this movie, because some of the visuals are just insane. There's a demon in this, or there's a demon creature or some sort of evil spirit that has possessed the little girl in the family, and you see its hand like crawling out of the throat of her at one point when she's looking in the mirror, and you see all sorts of like Carrie-esque scenes with like her commanding the wind to blow and causing horrifying things to happen. One of the most creepy scenes in the movie is in a hospital where, you know, the lights are flickering and she's just saying unsettling things. I think she's saying, "You hurt me, daddy," or something, and it's creepy. It's a creepy movie. It really nailed the horror vibe, and I thoroughly enjoyed it as a well put together horror movie that someone actually cared about. After the credits ran, I saw it was produced by Sam Raimi, so I should have expected it to be good going in, but I didn't know that, so that was a sort of an end of like, wow, that was actually great. And then I saw Sam Raimi's name, I was like, well, of course it was great. That's why. I'm kind of surprised that it's not been remade into the Conjuring universe, because it felt like a Conjuring movie, like how there's all the Conjuring adjacent movies like The Nun and Annabelle and whatnot. It felt like it would fit right into the Conjuring universe. I don't think Ed or Lorraine Warren ever touched the Dybbuk box, but pretty much everything about them in those movies and also their own real life narratives is a total lie. So you might as well at this point just be like, yeah, and they also dealt with the Dybbuk box, just, you know, lie further and put it in there. It would fit great in the Conjuring world. The entire like vibe, imagery, it's cool, and it, as I said, would be a nice palate cleanser to all of the Catholicism in the Conjuring universe. It would be cool to see another religious sect brought into it. I mean, there's so much cool things with you know, the Jewish religion. You got Kabbalah magic and whatnot. The Golem is a creature of classic horror cinema, you know, even more classic than you know, the Universal run. It's a creature that's from the Nosferatu Cabinet of Dr. Caligari era of horror. It's the golden age that came before the golden age. So it'd be cool to see a bit of a revival on that, and a bit more of a willingness to experiment with other cultures. Hell, get in those creepy, I think they're Korean ghosts, where the head and the spine disconnect from the body and goes off and does vampire stuff at night. That'd be great to see in a you know, multi-million-dollar Hollywood movie. Bring that into the Conjuring universe. Get Ed and Lorraine Warren to go up against a lady whose head's come off. That would be great. But do I recommend The Possession? Yes. It's a really good, fun horror movie. It's great quality, and it's got some genuinely unsettling moments. Do I recommend Unhuman? No. God, no. Steer clear. And with that said, you've been listening to Creative Elk's Theatre of Thrills podcast. I am Pat Dennis. It's a bit of a short one today. Usually I record these reviews the very next day, but it's been 3 days because I was busy, so it's just not as fresh in my mind. I might have had more shit to say if I had got onto it quicker. So excuse me for it being a shorter run. And tune in next week where I will talk about more random movies and ramble on some more.